So with this, I'll go ahead and start transitioning. Tim, can you hear me? You on?
Yeah. Hey, Dan.
Hey, Tim. And Gayle, you on? Mic working?
It is now.
Okay, super. Well, I do want to introduce Gayle Fink of Bowie State University and Tim Vlamis, yes, my brother, from Vlamis Software Solutions. And we did ask people for something that people don't know about them. Gayle, I had heard that you had something in common with the late Queen, and that you love four-legged animals. What is that all about?
Yes, I'd rather be spending my days playing with the horses and the dogs, as opposed to, as I would say, shoveling it here at work. So, yes, okay. I'm a big fan and admire the Queen's contributions over her reign.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And Tim, I did not take the liberty of asking you what to share because I know way too much about you. I was going to share a little known fact about you, but well, anyway, I edited that one out. But I did come up with something on the lake. You have a boat with a Greek theme, correct?
Yes, indeed. A Touch of Madness. So is the name of the boat, and it's from Nikos Kazantzakis. Everyone needs a touch of madness. Otherwise, they never dare cut the rope and be free. So that is
appropriate. All right, well, super. All right, well then, without further ado, I'll introduce Tim and Gayle. They're going to tell us about assessing post-grad outcomes using Oracle Analytics and Autonomous Database. Go ahead and take it away, I guess, Gayle.
All right, good morning still, everybody, or afternoon, depending on where you are in the world. I must say this is my first time being a part of this group, and I will say it's a little intimidating. So I am used to being in my own little realm, and venturing here into this space is a brand new experience for me. So I appreciate you all, your patience today. But Tim and I are going to share with you the work that we've done to track our bachelor degree recipients into subsequent enrollment and degrees after they finished here at Bowie State University. Tim, if you wouldn't mind going maybe to the next slide, please. So just to give you a grounding of where we are, Bowie State University is actually physically located between the city of Baltimore and our nation's capital, Washington, D.C. We are the oldest historically Black college and university in the state of Maryland, one of the oldest in the country, too. You may hear me use the term HBCUs. For me, that means historically Black college and university. We are actually a part of a multi-campus system called the University System of Maryland. There are actually 3 HBCUs within that system. And presently we have around over 40 some programs that we offer at the bachelor's, master's, and doctoral program, serving approximately 6,300 students. We are very proud to say that we award over 1,000 degrees annually also, and as you would expect that as an HBCU, our predominant population is African-American students. So we are very proud of the success that we have in helping these students be successful in their academic journey. So next slide, please, Tim. Also, to let you know my context of working at life, I am not a data scientist by training. I live in the world what's called institutional research. And institutional research is really what I would call the data arm of any university. We are responsible for submitting all of the mandatory reporting at the system. We support enrollment analyses, which can include retention, progression, graduation rates, all these sorts of things. We also look at academic success indicators, as well as do surveying and enrollment projections. The role of institutional research has expanded recently, I would say in the last 5 to 10 years, to look more at institutional effectiveness. That's what IE stands for. We put, we're actually now moving into the ROI of our institutions, return on investments. So we are now looking at more of our curriculum flows, curriculum management. We manage in my shop all the accreditations that are necessary for an institution. And OPA, we do the strategic planning for the institution. We not only have it at the institutional level, but we have it within each of our divisions. So we map all that and roll it up. SLO is Student Learning Outcomes Assessment. We support that functionality. We provide professional assistance with our faculty to then evaluate how much our students are learning and what they are learning, and if they are meeting the expected outcomes of our academic programs. But with this in mind too, we've been doing all this work without a data warehouse. Let me just say that straight up. We are now venturing into the autonomous data warehouse here with Oracle with the help of Vlamis. And one of our first little playing in the sandbox, shall we say, is our post-graduation outcomes. So, all right, Tim, if you wouldn't mind. So this was all the need for the data warehouse and the need for analytics at Bowie State University was very clear in our strategic plan. Not that I had any hand in that because I helped write the strategic plan. So let's get something in there for Gayle so that she has full employment for the rest of her life here. But we definitely saw the need for an analytics capacity at Bowie State University. Truthfully, we had a change in our president 5 years ago, who is all about how do you know? Don't tell me we're just going to keep throwing stuff on the wall and see what sticks. You give me a use case, you give me information about why something is necessary, and then you tell me whether or not it's successful. That has come from the very top, and it is now permeating throughout our organization. So with that in mind, we applied for and received a grant money it's a federal grant program called Title III. And in this case, HBGI has historically Black graduate institution. That's a section of our US federal government's Title III funding. And we received monetary support for moving this along. So it is through that process that we identified ADW and OAC as the tools that we wanted to use to build our warehouse. And then also throughout that process, Vlamis was identified by us or by Oracle as a great partner to help us on our journey. So I guess you're going to say, why do we want to track our bachelor's degree recipients and what they're doing after they graduate from us? Well, really, in the US, and I'm sure in everywhere else, it all goes back to that institutional ROI. We have one side of the house is, are they working? You know, what are their average salaries? Are they fully employed? And do their salaries grow over time? That's one side of the post-grad, the return on investment discussion, but it's really about lifelong learning. And that's what we really want to encourage too at Bowie State University. So we went first with tracking our post-grad enrollment. It also, for us, we have to report this data to our regional accreditor, as well as our specialized accreditations. So again, it is a part of our institutional effectiveness strategy. And we actually, why we wanted to take this for a test case is actually to take Vlamis through a test drive and to see what they can do to help us and work with us and then see if they were and they are, the great partners that they are to help us on our journey. So Tim, I believe you wanted to give a little
thanks,
preview
Gayle.
next.
Yeah, we're going to do a preview. I just wanted to mention that when we were, initially looking at this, there's a huge amount of data that Bowie State consumes, both from inside from their PeopleSoft environment as well as outside data providers and whatnot. And so when we're looking, okay, where do we start? We believe in, let's deliver some results quickly so that people can get behind this large initiative, this significant kind of move to the future. And so we determined, let's start with enrollment analytics for the warehouse. And for that, we kind of started looking at what kind of modeling do we want to do? How do we understand the huge number of PeopleSoft table sets, hundreds of tables. And then we said, okay, where is that headed? And it was in working with Gayle and her team that we said, let's start with the end in mind and look at what we're going to do with enrollment analytics and what's happening with that postgraduate success. Do that on a very quick start basis. So basically we said, let's not necessarily do all our extraction work. We're going to start on a very quick startup ramp and deliver results pretty fast. So that was kind of the thinking behind it. Let me just kind of alt tab over here to our. So this is what we came up with in terms of kind of extracting data and delivering some initial summary results. So you can see here, we had postgraduate students since 2015. This means how many Bowie State students went on to do some type of postgraduate work after they've graduated. And we see that, so we typically lay things out with kind of a subject in the upper left-hand corner, supporting information underneath it. The percentage of graduates that are active, have been active, is 36%, so more than a third, is pretty tremendous. And this is a number of Bowie State students within our data set that we were getting from a combination of the Bowie State internal data as well as the external data provider, the syndicated data set. So, and what you see over here is the model that we actually, the tables that we built in ADW and then joined them in a direct data set into OAC. So I hope that gives you guys a little bit of background in terms of what we were trying to understand, and then the various dimensions. Just, here are the various programs. Here are the percentage of students that are going on. So you can see this is number of students versus how many. The percentages vary quite dramatically from program to program. And of course, how many years they've been out of school and what cohort year they're in. And depending on what subject they're moving on in study determines, kind of how active they are after they've graduated. So you can see for the 2015 cohort, it's here in postgraduate year 3. Now this may look fairly straightforward on a visual presentation. It took a little bit of work to get there. So let's kind of go back and look at a little bit of that work. And I would also say, if you guys have questions as we're going through this, please, let us know. Okay, that's what we just looked at.
If you have questions, you can put them in the Q&A, folks.
Yeah.
And we'll try and handle them as we go. I'll curate them and ask them as go. Go ahead, Tim.
Yeah, Gayle, did you want to talk about these data sources that you've been managing yourself? Yeah.
Yep, this is all. I'm becoming an OAC lover. I was, just because the tools we had before were all access-based, in access. That's how old school we have been. But we do what we have to do with the tools that we have at this time. So for this data set, we took an extraction of all of our degree recipients since 2015. We then attached various student demographic information to that list. But the biggest challenge in my mind is the behemoth that's called the National Student Clearinghouse Subsequent Enrollment Matching Data. The National Student Clearinghouse is I will say, I guess it's not a vendor per se, but they do provide a service. They're actually a loan processor. The National Student Clearinghouse started out as a student loan processor, and have now expanded into doing many more things. They actually then collect enrollment information from, I believe their coverage is over 90% of higher education institutions in the United States. So we take our degree recipient information and then match it to the clearinghouse data that we have. And then the clearinghouse sends us a file back, which I know Tim and I have had many discussions about.
Yeah.
Not only is it's long, and it's also deep. It was a behemoth to try to work through and classify and how to structure the data. And Tim will speak more to that in a few minutes, but it was a bear to work with initially, but I think we've got a game plan on it now. Then all that data then is this IPEDS classification of instructional programs. IPEDS is is our federal government's process for our mandatory reporting. Can you all still hear me? I'm getting a little notice up on my.
Yeah.
But your camera turned off.
All right, is it back now? Oh, it did. All right, let's try this. And it's like,
It's all right.
I knew something happened there. Thank you.
Yep.
IPEDS is the U.S. federal government's way of how we have to classify all of our academic programs. And Tim will show you also how deep that data set can be too. We're down to 6-digit classifications. So, we take our degree recipient data that has SIP information in it. We have information coming from the National Student Clearinghouse looking at what degree the students are going into and whether or not they graduated. And then that green bucket at the end, the IPEDS data, tells us what that SIP code means. That's basically it. So, Tim, I think it's time to do a little bit more detail on how you worked your magic.
So what we wanted to do, like we were saying, is do something quickly and deliver it back to the organization pretty fast. So we decided to go and emphasize kind of development speed versus what you might consider would be a traditional data warehouse project, where we validate everything and carefully model everything and build the full extracts and everything else. So what we did is we use multi-table data sets rather than the repository in terms of our modeling. And what we did is we loaded the data into ADW and then did our work in ADW building this multi-table data set. And I'll show you what we did. And that was kind of, and Dan can pipe in on this as well, because he did all this work. But this was what can we get done quickly. And what when Gayle says that the data was pretty wide, I mean, we had hundreds of columns, kinds of widths with hundreds of characters in each column. So it was quite a lot. We also had to do some calculations in the front end rather than in the warehouse, just because we needed to get the data in and then figure out what do we want to do with it. What we also suggest is when we're initially getting our hands around data sets, we want to start working with them quickly in terms of how we want to use it and results presentations, so that informs the modeling process. And then what we do is we move the modeling down the stack, if you will, from the front end to the middle tier to the data warehouse over time, as we need to be faster and more efficient. So we did use the database tools utility for loading the data sets. That was a pretty interesting exercise. It's a new capability for ADW, so that you don't necessarily have to write all your scripts in SQL, that there is a GUI for you. And then the three major sources were Bowie State Clearinghouse and the SIP data from the government. And what we did is we used staging tables to unpivot this data, because we got multiple files from the clearinghouse and we had to manipulate those files in order to bring them together and do our joins and, set it up for combining the BSU and SIP data with the clearinghouse data. So what we ended up doing was we had post-grad years 1 through 8, and we did that 2 different ways, by the post-grad year as well as just on a ingest basis. So in other words, what we ended up with was 8 records per student, 1 for each year. But you would think the government and, data syndicators would be excellent at manipulating and creating data sets that are easy to use. It wasn't exactly quite that clean.
One thing, Tim, I'll interject.
Yeah.
One thing that we were interested in trying to do in that was use the unpivot capability. If those have seen the demos from OAC, where you can unpivot the data and it does a database call. We found that because that supports one measure going across, we couldn't use that. So we had actually used the unpivot SQL operation to unpivot the data because it was across. Gayle mentioned there's so many columns across. Many of them were post-grad year 1, information about that. Post-grad year 2, information about that. Everything going across up to 8 years. And unpivoting, the Oracle unpivot function operated very quickly, but we could not use the one from OAC. We had to use it as a primitive from the unpivot in SQL.
Yeah. Thanks, Stan. That's exactly right. I would also say in terms of kind of compiling our demographics and whatnot, we did do some things where we actually repeated data a few different ways because we weren't sure how we're going to use it. So an example might be, we had this down towards the bottom, ethnicity 97, which was the set of what is the ethnicity of the individual student, and as well as individual fields, which were 1 or 0 for those. So there were a variety of things that we did in terms of kind of pulling that data in from PeopleSoft and preparing it and manipulating it for use in the front end. Yeah, I just thought I would share real quickly this national data set from the U.S. Department of Education. There's a code for that, and the reason there's a code for that is because here is a listing of the codes, and if you expand them all, you will see that each one of these sections, so you see agriculture, business management, general. I know this is a little bit small, but it literally goes on forever. And each one of these links opens up into a further set of codes. And so, and all the institutions are responsible for, basically aligning their programs with these various codes. And they have to figure out if it's a business program that should be under business, then agriculture, or in agriculture, then business, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. There are wizards, there are all kinds of facts, there are all kinds of things to determine how to use this stuff. This is only that agricultural science area. So it's a huge, huge set of codes that we had to figure out how we actually going to use this and interpret it. And do we want to apply the logic of 0, 1, and all these numbers are, if you will, smart numbers as opposed to just regular numbers. All right. Gayle, that you did this in Access, I tip my hat because that is, yeah. So this is 1 record per student, just kind of, we had to make the clearinghouse data was unique by student, by institution, by year is how it came in. And then of course we had this lovely data set from the US Department of Education. All right, this is what it basically looked like in OAC. And so what we did is we built, we used as our central table, if you will, the BSU student, 1 record per student, if you will. And then we built around that, okay, here is the the syndicated data by student in terms of what they did at postgraduate, and here's the how we recognize what kind of study they went on to in terms of postgraduate work, as well as here was that syndicated data by year set of records, and then their enrollment history. And we had to determine whether we're also going to track, 4-year students versus 2-year students. There's a lot of nuance in terms of how we actually built this and kind of did our joins so that we didn't lose any of the data. We brought in the zip codes so that we could understand the relationship between the Bowie State programs and the reported government zip codes, or how the government looks at them. And then we did a self-join here just to confirm some of the data by year so that we could get cohorts and whatnot. So, and then this was done on a pretty fast basis, so that I don't know if we would, this was our first attempt to get this into ADW and get it working and deliver results, as opposed to how are we going to build our fact tables and stars and whatnot. That's what we're doing on the major warehouse side. This was kind of a sprint project. I just want to make that clear.
Tim, that relates to one of the questions that came up that came in. Looks like you used DV. I think what they mean is the multi-table data sets.
Yes.
And I will interject. I was actually interested in trying out the multi-table data sets, a new capability at the time in OAC. Any plans to model the data in the RPD? Any benefit to modeling in the RPD? Do you want to take that, or I can take it? Either way.
There are benefits to both. I mean, what we were looking for is why I kind of had that bolded. We're trying to do it quickly. Yeah. And we basically have a greater facility to do things fast when we bring it into ADW, manipulate it. It has more power, and then we just join it and start building screens. So that was the methodology.
Thank you.
Yeah, I just this is kind of in there for reference. Just kind of extreme. We had to do a lot of I think Gayle likes the word munging and wrangling, and we had to kind of pull all this stuff together. So Gayle, I don't know if you knew you were a data munger before, but
I've been called worse.
You're called worse, right? Okay, let's do this. Let's kind of take a look. Yeah. Oh, just for those of you who wondered, did we actually write any code? Yes, we did. Dan made me put this up here to demonstrate that he did write some SQL. So kudos, Dan. All right, let's go to our demo here. And we saw this. This is what this live data set looked like, just so you can see the various joins and whatnot. I do kind of want to get to, if you're wondering, just so it's not clear, this is through an ADW connection. So each one of these is an individual table that was created in ADW and then brought in and joined together using the multi-table data set capability in ADW from a database connection. All right. Just to give you guys a sense then of what we did with the kind of then how do we expect that Gayle and her team are going to use this? We looked at the summary slide by the various dimensions, and what we believe in is kind of giving people an overview so that they can see some comparisons and some differences. So if we're looking at how many students were there from BSU in psychology, we can see that, and then how many of those went on to postgraduate work. What we can then do is have a joint data set that gives us the percentage and gives it within the context of what percentage of those, how does that program compare with the other programs in the school. So then, of course, there's a great deal of interest, I would say, Gayle, for the department heads and whatnot to know, where are my students going, right? Because they want to know, well then where are they doing their postgraduate work? And so here, one of the other dimensions that we really didn't have room to put in our summary table, so we put it to the immediate right, was here are the various target institutions where Bowie State grads go on to work, and then what programs within Bowie State are they coming from? And then, of course, we flip it and we say, okay, for these programs, what institutions do they go to? And the things that kind of are interesting and pop out, you can look here, health professionals, while they're going to Walden, basically. And you can see that Walden is the #2 destination, and a big percentage of them are coming from basically the nursing program. So, Gayle, I don't know if those kinds of insights pop out in, tables with, dozens and dozens of rows and hundreds of columns. I think we got to.
Yeah, this made it, when we showed this to some of our academic department chairs, they were like, wow. And even the filtering that you can do on the left-hand side was really helpful to bring it home, especially under the program name.
Yeah, so if we can go cohort year, we can
you can actually drill down to the program name, and if you
and we can combine them.
Psychology or social work. For example, our psychology program has a agreement with a couple of different institutions. So they wanted to know that Chicago School of Psychology, that is actually one of their partners and feeder institutions for their programs. It was very quick to say, whoa, look how many people then enrolled right there at the Chicago School of Psychology. UMGC, which is the University of Maryland Global Campus, as well as they're in there twice because they have 2 different codes, depending on how they're reporting to the National Student Clearinghouse. So, again, if you saw them earlier, there would be another big institution where our students are going for their graduate education. They're a fully online institution, and based in Maryland. But they were like, wow, our psychology department chair was really excited to see the number of our students going to their partner institution.
Yeah. And then what we simply do is we build out, if you will, by dimension. We want to look at, okay, here's a flow diagram so that we can see the relativity of these zip codes versus the program. And we had to rewrite some of these names to be shorter and whatnot. But that way you can come in here and see, oh, for those business administration, zip codes, what areas are they coming from, or vice versa. You can run it backwards as well. So this kind of relationship diagram, it was very, very interesting to people. They look complex and they look complicated in the beginning. I think as people start to use them, they'll get more familiar and more comfortable. Likewise, we're just looking to hear by when did they graduate, because obviously, COVID has had a big impact on where people are going. And you can see even within some of this, for example, that, health professions, if we look at, how many of their postgrad students by postgrad year, relatively small number, 8% went on to postgraduate work the first year, which is very different than, for example, social sciences, where 26% went on, or public service. Immediately at 40% of people, the graduates, went on to postgraduate work. But then as you get further out, they sustain it more. So there's kind of different experiences in terms of how we slice and dice this data by, you know, how many years out have they been out of school. We did the multidimensional slice and dice by zip codes. You know, again, same kind of work here. Look at it on a discrete basis. Look at it by different dimensions, cohorts. The demographic work was interesting to see here, just the difference between men and women and how many, you know, basically the women are really going on to more postgraduate work than the men are. So that was pretty insightful there. The last thing I just wanted to share quickly is kind of this post-grad scatter, where we can start looking at, you know, how many students were there, and then what percentage are going on to postgraduate work, and how does it compare with all the other programs. So I think, and you know, we got a very positive response from the visualizations. I think there may have been a little bit overwhelmed at first, but as they're getting used to them, they're enjoying, you know, the slice and dice and seeing things within context. I'll just jump back real quickly to the slides and mention that we are, you know, building a foundation, you know, for the future, and that Gayle, you guys have no shortage of data to analyze.
No, we are very deep.
And so we're in the midst of you know, doing our phase 1 for the warehouse and the RPD right now, and we're kind of very excited about where this project is headed, and yeah, and the kind of positive involvement with it. It's been a great amount of fun working together, so we're looking forward to it.
And I know the university has gone from very static reports. Now we're moving into a little bit more dynamic as a stopgap in between our time until we get ADW and OAC really rocking to help our customers, our internal customers.
With that, we'll take any questions in the last few minutes, Dan, or if some have popped up, or
Well, we'll see if any more come in. I did ask the one on the RPD. I'll expand on that a little bit while we wait to see if any other questions come in. We'd have just another minute or so before we have to transition to our break. But while waiting for something to come in, I'll say that we are in the process now of building out more of the entire data warehouse for Bowie State University, as opposed to just this pilot, almost skunkworks project of just looking at postgrad outcomes. I think the RPD method and the new semantic modeler is especially appropriate for when you're looking at an entire data warehouse. And that's where we will reevaluate, in effect, and use the information that we learned from this to model it, if you will, properly in the data warehouse. But we're pleased with what we could do with just setting up a multi-table data set and doing the joins in the OAC product itself.
yes.
Okay. Well, with that, I don't see any other questions that came in. Oh, I also will mention that this same presentation will be on as part of Oracle Cloud World. So for those that are looking at attending, or if you know people that are going, there'll be a presentation. Thrilled that this was picked up for Oracle Cloud World. So Tim and Gayle will be presenting this again on the big stage. Thank you. Thank you both for presenting on this, and we're going to transition to our break. Thanks, Gayle and Tim.
We do have a question, Dan, real quick.
Yeah, go ahead. I didn't see it. There we go. It just popped up. What are the size of the data sets?
So I would say the degree file is roughly 6,500 records over a 6-year period. And then, oh my God, Tim, how big are those data sets from Clearinghouse?
Yeah, the Clearinghouse and the zip code were, Dan, I want to say tens of thousands. They weren't huge.
Yeah, they were very wide.
Why?
They were very,
Uh,
very wide and they were cumbersome to work with. So
Yeah.
it was more the process of how do we, we had some field names that were literally exceeded the maximum 128 character.
Yeah.
So, and why, a syndicated data service would be sending out such wide column names is beyond me, but they did. So, so there was a lot of work we had to do just in terms of cutting things down to
Yeah.
make it more reasonable.
So, yeah, the challenge was in the width, not as much in the length of the file. All right. Well, thank you very much, Gayle and Tim. We're going to transition now towards our break, and I'll go ahead and share my screen on here. We have a